Huckleberry Hound is a weird property to me. For how fundamentally important it is, I wasn't too fully invested in it due to having pretty much no access to his show. It seems like nowadays some people are aware of Huckleberry Hound, but it's nowhere near as popular as it should be. He had a lot of success in the late 50s and early 60s while the Huckleberry Hound show was still airing. He was like Hanna-Barbera's mascot in a way. But when other characters from the Hanna-Barbera universe were being put front and center, all of a sudden, Huck wasn't quite as prominent anymore, even to this day. Huckleberry Hound is a character whose popularity could have been bigger compared to the likes of Scooby-Doo and Yogi Bear. Whenever I watched Boomerang, not only did they frequently play the Cartoon Network short Soundhound, but it also seemed like Huck was the most prominent character in the various toy bumpers. It gave me the feeling that he was like the channel's mascot in some way. While I never watched any of the Huckleberry Hound cartoons back then, his character and design always stuck with me. After Huck became my second favorite Jellystone character, I went on the now defunct Boomerang streaming service to finally watch his cartoons. At this point, I started thinking to myself, man, why hasn't there been a true Huckleberry Hound reboot? Sure, we did get Jellystone, which felt like a love letter to Hanna-Barbera's Golden Age shows, but nothing like the original Huck show. Most of the things we've gotten from Huckleberry Hound in the past decade are usually Yogi Bear projects like the Spunko shorts and the live-action movie. Other than that, it's mainly just cameos. If Hanna-Barbera didn't overly shove Yogi into a lot of things, I feel like Huck would have still had the prominence that he once had. Maybe he could have starred in a feature film like Yogi Bear did in 1964. While Huckleberry's chances of getting a feature film is slim, mostly due to Warner Bros.' incompetence of marketing him on the same levels as Tom and Jerry, we already have a Huckleberry Hound movie in some form. From 1987 to 1988, Hanna-Barbera produced a series of hour-and-a-half movies that aired on syndicated television, called the Hanna-Barbera Superstars 10. There were 3 Yogi Bear movies, 3 Scooby-Doo movies, 2 Jetsons movies, and even a Top Cat movie. The movies themselves are a bit of a mixed bag, but the best film they released in my opinion was The Good, The Bad, and Huckleberry Hound. Or as I personally like to call it, The Good, The Bad, and the Huckleberry. This was the first time that Huckleberry Hound was in the spotlight since the original Huckleberry Hound show from 1958 to 1962. Before this movie, Huck had been playing second banana in Yogi Bear's shows, specials, and other spin-offs for far too long. Imagine if Mickey Mouse was stuck being a side character in Donald Duck's shows. But this movie would be Huck's ultimate comeback, even if it didn't last very long. The Good, the Bad, and Huckleberry Hound premiered on syndication in May 1988. It was a Western comedy loosely based on the Huckleberry Hound cartoons that put the character in a Western setting. Interesting that it's a Western parody, since that type of genre usually belongs to quick draw McGraw. Actually, production of the film did begin as a quick draw McGraw film. Even though Joe Barbera found the pitch uninteresting, he gave writers Tom Ruegger and John Loudon the green light to rework the film to star Huckleberry Hound instead. According to Tom, they vowed to make it the best darn Huck cartoon ever. The movie also had more creative freedom. With the other films from Superstars 10, Barbera controlled so much of the entire plot and dialogue, so the fact that he trusted Tom and John enough to let them write most of Huckleberry's script was very fortunate for them in retrospect, though that didn't mean there wasn't any meddling involved, which we'll talk about as we go through the film's summary. Keep in mind, the Hanna-Barbera Superstars 10 films were very important to Joe, which explains why he was a complete control freak during the production of those films. As for the movie's availability, the movie has been released on VHS a few times as well as on Laserdisc. In 2011, Warner Archive released it on a DVD-R disc. In 2024, Warner Archive remastered the film and released it on Blu-ray via a complete box set for Hanna-Barbera's Superstars 10. It was also given a separate release as well. So did Tom Ruegger and John Loudon succeed in making the best Huckleberry Hound story possible? Well, let's find out. We start the movie off with the opening credits, which is in the form of a slideshow until we get some Huckleberry Hound action. The opening music is very powerful and impacting. It helps create a calm western feel until it starts to get all excited and suspenseful. Chapter 1. The Legend Begins. We are introduced to Huckleberry Hound, voiced by the one and only Dawes Butler, as he's riding his horse to California, with his goal to one day start a country farm.
Heading west to pan for gold?
Heck no. I'm gonna settle down on a quaint country farm and raise goats and pigs, and maybe a little ruckus on Saturday night.
We are also introduced to the film's main antagonist, the Dalton Gang, with Stinky Dalton, being voiced by McGill Gorilla voice actor Alan Melvin, being the only Dalton to actually come from the original Huckleberry Hound show. The other 3 Daltons are Pinky, voiced by Charlie Adler, Finky, voiced by Pat Fraley, and their leader, Stinky, voiced by Michael Bell. At some point, Stinky gets caught and is put in trial.
You have been charged with assault, train robbery, cattle rustling, and worst of all, forgetting Mother's Day.
Gee, I'm sorry.
Now you must pay for your crimes. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what is your verdict?
Guilty, guilty, Mr. Stinky's guilty.
Mr. Stinky, I sentence you to 90 years in the state penitentiary. Make that 90 days in the county jail. All right, then. How about 90 minutes in your room with no television?
No television? Forget it, pal. I'll take the 90 days.
Chapter 2, The Town of 2-Bit. With Stinky in jail, the other three Daltons are searching for him. At the same time, Huck shows up in 2-Bit, California to settle down. Unfortunately, the remaining Daltons show up and stole his horse, so now he has to walk bare feet. On the way, he meets up with Yogi and Boo Boo Bear, who left Jellystone Park to get away from tourists.
I couldn't take it anymore. All the tourists did was say, look at the bears, look at the bears, look at the bears. Shh.
Relax, Yogi. There isn't a tourist within 100 miles of here.
Look at the bears, look at the bears, look at the bears, look at the bears, look at the bears.
I can't take it anymore.
Fun fact, not only is this gag a reference to the Huckleberry Hound show's first Yogi Bear cartoon, Yogi's Big Break, but it's also the one gag that Joe Barbera really wanted to have in this film so badly after Tom and John kept refusing. According to John Luden on Tom Ruegger's blog, so I remember Joe telling us about the kids singing, "Look at the bears, look at the bears, look at the bears." We smiled and nodded and went back to work, thinking he would just forget it in a day or two. Every week we had to give Joe an update on the script and where we were going with it. The following week, we returned to his office and he brought it up again, acting out the entire scene. Heading back to your office, we wondered why Joe was insistent on this, especially since Yogi wasn't even in the story, and opted to just leave it out, especially because it was so senseless. The next week, Joe had read the latest draft and asked why the scene wasn't in the script, and I think he was kinda bugged that we didn't see how funny it was. One of us asked why the kids were there, and why they were in a bus. Joe said it could be a tour bus. He then, of course, reenacted the whole scene. I remember going back to your office and saying we should see what would happen if we left it out once again. You were smarter than that, and advised that we better just put it in, so we could make it work. We wrote it in, then I recall, in a homage to Groucho, having Huck turn to camera and deadpan.
Now that was sort of a bizarre interlude, wasn't it?
Or something like that. Back to the story, the remaining Daltons visited the Rusty Nail Saloon for a drink.
I'm Frankie.
I'm Pinky. Surprise, motherfucker.
Chapter 3, The Good Meets the Bad. Huckleberry Hound visits the Rusty Nail Saloon.
Seems like a mighty friendly place. Shockings, they even take your hat at the door.
Oh, hello there, big boy. What can Rusty Nails do for you?
My palate is a bit parched and I'd like a shot of root beer. But unfortunate like, all I got to pay for it with is this here gold nugget.
The Daltons notice Huck's gold nugget and persuade him into a game of poker in an attempt to win it. Also, Huck's root beer is green for some reason.
Afraid not, stranger. I win with 4 aces. Not so fast. I got 5 aces. I win.
Hold it, hold it. I win. I've got 6 aces.
All I got is a pair of threesies, but I couldn't resist getting in on this comedy pie gag.
The Daltons get mad after Huck accuses them of cheating, and so they challenge him into a fight. And even though it took 24 hours, Huck eventually won the fight and got his horse back. After winning, Huck decides to go to the bank to deposit his gold nugget. Chapter 4, The Robbery. At the bank, Huck became Quick Draw McGraw's first customer.
Which entitles you to receive one of these complimentary gift-type presents.
First, a brand new fountain pen, complete with ink. Blue. My favorite color.
Or you might choose this lovely calendar, picturizing the Grand Tetons. Whoops, this here's my calendar.
Huck chooses the pen as his complimentary prize. The Daltons barge in to rob the safe containing Huck's gold nugget. They even took his complimentary pen.
Ooh, now I'm really mad.
Huck wants to see the sheriff, only to realize that the town no longer has one. To make matters worse, Stinky Dalton was finally able to break out of jail.
And now jail guard Mr. Peebles will tell us exactly what happened. Mr. Peebles? You don't say. You don't say. He don't say. You heard it here first. a detailed report on the Stinky Dalton breakout.
Chapter 5, The New Sheriff. At 2-Bit City Hall, Mayor Hokey Wolf and the citizens discuss what to do with the Dalton gang. They freak out after hearing that Stinky had escaped, and plans on visiting town to gun down the sheriff. So after Huckleberry arrives to complain about the Dalton gang, Hokey elects Huck to be the town's sheriff without his consent.
I just want a quaint country farm where I can raise goats and pigs.
Nonsense, nonsense! All those in favor say aye.
Aye!
All those opposed say nay.
Nay!
It is now my pleasure to pin this badge on the new sheriff of 2-Bit.
Sheriff Huckleberry, would you care to make a statement?
Yes. Always wear a shirt when somebody pins a badge on your chest. Yow!
With the remaining Daltons wreaking havoc in 2-Bit, Sheriff Huck attempts to arrest them, who he successfully does after 3 failed attempts.
So, thanks to the bravery of Sheriff Huck, 3 of the Daltons were behind bars. But the 4th Dalton, Stinky, was on his way toward 2-Bit.
You got that right, Mr. Narrator. And I got me a bullet with the sheriff's name on it.
Fun fact, this particular gag was previously used in the Huckleberry Hound cartoon, Sheriff Huckleberry, where Dinky also had a bullet with Huck's name on it. Back to the story, the citizens throw Huckleberry a party in anticipation of his demise.
Of course, my friends here might beat Stinky to the punch. Punch bowl, that is.
Huck delivers a speech, hoping that the citizens would help him defeat Stinky, but everyone ran away.
Looks like there'll be a few less people on my Christmas card list this year.
Chapter 6, The Countdown. Huckleberry Hound tries to get his friends to join him, but they refuse.
Don't worry your pretty little head, Huck. I've got you covered, completely protected.
I knew I could count on you.
That's right. I've signed you up for $1 million life insurance policy. With yours truly, Hokey Wolf, as sole beneficiary. Sign here, please.
I'd sign it, too, accepting that them Daltons stole my free complimentary type pen.
No problem, I'll sign it for you. I mean, what are friends for?
I'm beginning to wonder that myself.
They even go as far as to run away from 2-Bit on Peter Potamus's cruise ship.
What them folks don't realize is that you can't run away from your problems.
Back to his office, Huck waits for the arrival of Stinky.
No wonder they call this place 2-Bit. What a dump!
Out of my way, lady! I'm Stinky Dalton.
Hey, where did his body go? Chapter 7, The Showdown. Stinky finally arrives at 2-Bit to take care of Sheriff Huckleberry.
I will never play with guns. I will never play with guns. I will never play with guns. But he didn't say nothing about playing with TNT. I'm gonna blow 2-Bit into itty-bitty bits.
We now get a series of antics of Stinky trying to blow up Huckleberry with dynamite, to little to no success.
You know, if my free complimentary type pen hadn't been stolen, I'd write Mr. Stinky a thank you note. Once more, I wonder who was rat-tat-tatting on my door.
A singing telegram for Sheriff Huck. Happy birthday, Sheriff Huck. Wishing you lots and lots of luck. With love from Stinky Dalton.
Chapter 8, The Jailbreak. After failing to defeat Huckleberry, Stinky plans on breaking his brothers out of jail.
Just a second, Granny. I better inspect that there tasty treat, just in case you, by chance, baked a file into it.
Oh, Sheriff, how could you think such a thing?
You can't be too careful around desperate criminals, ma'am. With Sheriff Huck on the job, nobody's gonna pull a fast one.
Dang, he's no better than Arthur. With the Dalton gang reunited, Huckleberry Hound chases down the gang. Chapter 9, The Chase. While chasing the Dalton gang down, Huckleberry uses many of his tricks and disguises to catch them, resulting in the gang falling down a pit.
So nice of you to drop in. What a relief. For a second there, we thought you was gonna be that pesky sheriff.
Fooled you, didn't I?
Hold it! What are we afraid of? There's 4 of us and just 1 of him. We got him outnumbered. Yeah!
You know, I was hoping they'd never figure that one out.
Let's get him!
Looks like I am gonna be a tad late for supper after all.
Chapter 10, The Big Kaboom. The Dalton gang tied up Huckleberry and strapped him to a rocket. His horse attempted to rescue him, but he was too late. The rocket launches, explodes, and crashes down.
So long, Huck!
Chapter 11, The Recap. Since the first act lasted around 50 minutes, Tom and John decide to add the recap, which retells an abridged version of the film's first act. Not only does it work as a nod to the 8-hour-long stage adaptation, The Life and Adventures of Nicholas Nickleby, but it also helps to refresh your memory of what's going on, since the movie does drag on a bit, though not as badly as the other Superstars 10's films. Chapter 12, The Dalton Empire. With Huckleberry Hound dead, the Dalton gang started terrorizing 2-Bit, and then we get a musical number all about their love for money.
All we ever think about is gold. Our teeth are gold, our hair is gold, we even cry goldfish. We're so filled up full of gold, it's coming out our ears.
Fun fact, it was Bill Hanna who actually snuck in the song without Tom and John knowing. And you can definitely tell by the awful lyrics, but if you ask me, I think its hokiness makes it ironically funny. Huck's horse, still mourning the loss of his rider, sees that the Dalton gang have now taken over 2-Bit and became the mayors, kicking Hokey, Yogi, Boo Boo, Quick Draw, Babalooey, and Snagglepuss in the process. Meanwhile, in Native American territory, the chief's daughter, Desert Flower, voiced by B.J. Ward, goes out to pick flowers, only for her to discover a rocket with Huckleberry Hound in it, meaning that he survived the entire time, but has since lost his memory. Chapter 3, The Love Story. Desert takes Huck back home to let him rest.
Well, I best be moseying along.
No, you must rest, and I will tend to you until you are well.
Well, in that case, I kinda hope I never get better.
We then get a series of sequences where Huck and Desert enjoy some quality time together. Unfortunately, the chief doesn't approve of her daughter dating Huck.
Can't you see they're in love?
But he is not one of us. He is blue.
At night, Huckleberry sings a song to Desert Flower as a way to show her how he feels, which is a cover of the song By the Light of the Silvery Moon. And yes, we get to hear Dawes Butler sing in this one.
Honeymoon, keep on shining in June. Ba-ba-ba-boo. Your silvery beams will bring love's dreams. We'll be cuddling soon by the silvery moon.
After the song, Huck proposes to Desert, to which she agrees. The chief, on the other hand, well...
Absolutely not! You cannot marry this blue hombre. Why, you don't even know his name. He doesn't even know his name.
On account of I have amnesia, Mr. Chief, sir.
In order to win over the chief, Huck must undergo the initiation test. Chapter 14, The Test. The first test is in the form of a game show, and despite the chief trying to sabotage Huck's chances, he still got the answers right. The second and last test is a wrestling match with the tribe's strongest member, Chuckling Chipmunk.
Looks like I'm gonna have to use some strategy. Pretty clever of me, ain't it? He didn't hurt me a teensy bit.
Fun fact, this was another gag reused from Sheriff Huckleberry, where Stinky Dalton did the same thing, but only this time here, the toy car gets towed.
Ain't that cute? Little old toy tow truck. I must admit, that laugh of his is starting to get on my nerves.
Speaking of laughs, here's another fun fact behind the scenes. While coming up with Chuckling Chipmunks' laugh, Joe Barbera did a silly little giggle, and wanted to make sure it sounded exactly what you hear in the film. Voice actor Howard Morris was cast to voice Chuckling Chipmunk, and did his own version of the laugh. But when it came time for voice pickups, John Luden explained to voice director Andrea Romano how Joe wanted the laugh to sound like. So Andrea asked Howard to redo the lines exactly what Joe wanted. After the session was over, Howard went up to John and went full on Richard Pryor in his face, which according to John, almost to the point of being unintelligible. Back to the story, Huckleberry Hound managed to lose. However, after saving Desert Flower from the waterfall, Huck finally got the approval to marry her.
You fell!
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here to join Desert Flower and the Blue Ombre in holy matrimony.
Huck's horse finally finds him. Now speaking, provided by Frank Welker, tells Huck what has happened to 2-Bit, to which Huck regains his memory. Huck leaves to go back to 2-Bit, but promises to return to the wedding when he's done.
But Blue Ombre, what about our wedding?
Desert Flower, I have some unfinished business to tend to. Will you wait for me?
For as long as it takes, my Blue Ombre.
Mush.
I haul faithful horsey away.
Huck, could you please stop calling me Faithful Horsey?
Why is that?
Because my name is Bob.
Chapter 15, The Roundup. Bob tells Huck that his friends were banished to a rundown circus.
Giddy up, you dumb horse!
Yeah, move it, you dopey donkey.
Ooh, my aching sack of really ache.
See, Quickstraw, I wish these children would thin down.
Now hold on there. I'll do the thinning around here, Baba Louie, and don't you forget it.
Huck urges them to help him go back to 2-Bit to defeat the Dalton gang.
Once before, I asked you for help and you let me down. I'm gonna ask you one more time. Do it for yourselves. Do it for your friends. Do it for 2-Bit.
But how do we infiltrate Daltonville?
With a little help from some old pals, Rusty Nails and Red Eye.
And Huck's Faithful Horsey, Bob.
Well, boys, what do you say?
We say all for one for all.
And everybody for 2-Bit.
Chapter 16, The Setup. At the saloon, the Dalton gang are warned that the ghost of Huckleberry Hound was gonna come to 2-Bit to haunt them, followed by a spooky musical number, while Awesome is a little bit of a filler song. The visuals are cool though.
The spirit has risen up from the ground. No way to stop him, he's 2-Bit bound. The creepy, crawly, icky, yucky, Huckleberry Hound.
Boogie, 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 boogie.
You thought he'd die,
Boogie, boogie, boogie.
no place to hide.
Boogie, 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 boogie.
He's coming to get you.
Boogie, boogie, boogie.
Boogie, woogie, boogie, woogie.
Chapter 17, The Final Showdown. It's now midnight, and the train shows up to 2-Bit. Huck and his friends use special effects to pose him as a ghost, to frighten the Daltons.
What do you want?
I'm gonna haunt you for the rest of your life.
No, anything but that!
They give him back his gold nugget, only for them to escape back to their hideout, which turned out to be a prison in disguise.
We've been had!
In more ways than one. You see, I'm still alive.
Huckleberry Hound is congratulated in defeating the Daltons, and even gets his free complimentary pen back.
Now, do you know what the moral of this here story is?
Always take the trip to Tahiti instead of the free pen?
Well, that's true, but also, crime does not pay.
While his friends return to 2-Bit, Huck returns back to Desert Flower to finish off the wedding. Chapter 18, The Final Chapter. Snagglepuss became an actor at a theater, Quick Draw McGraw became the sheriff of 2-Bit, Hokey became a wagon dealer, Yogi and Boo Boo returned to Jellystone, and last but not least, Huckleberry Hound now lives on a country farm with his family.
And we all live happily ever after.
One problem I have with every single movie from Hanna-Barbera Superstars 10 is that despite their hour-and-a-half runtime, these films drag on way too long. These films are just often either padded with forgettable filler that doesn't advance the story, or have scenes that just go at a fairly slow pace. But The Good, the Bad, and the Huckleberry does a better job managing its runtime. Since the Huckleberry Hound show relies most on comedy, the film manages to add many gags to keep things more engaging. Some reuse gags from the original show, while others are based on tropes that had been done on the show before. They even added a recap after the first 50 minutes, which serves as a good reminder for those who weren't keeping up with the story, since the first act, I will admit, is a bit all over the place. Luckily, the humor and jokes don't completely overshadow the main story. The overall plot was well written, and really captured so much of the Huckleberry Hound show very well. One big complaint I have with many of Hanna-Barbera's later projects during the 70s and 80s is how little they captured the humor and flair of the shows that came before. I'm not sure if it was because of corporate greed from Taft Broadcasting, who owned Hanna-Barbera during that time. Maybe it's because the characters from that era were written to be more one-dimensional compared to their original shows, or maybe Taft thought Huck wouldn't sell well without Yogi as a starring role, as seen in Yogi's Gang, Yogi's Space Race, and Yogi's Treasure Hunt. But in my opinion, The Good, the Bad, and Huckleberry Hound does prove that Huck can still have a starring role without Yogi being the main character. After all, it was the Huckleberry Hound show that made Yogi famous in the first place. No longer does Huckleberry Hound feel like a basic secondary character like he was in the 70s and early 80s. He feels more like how I'd expect Huck to be in the original show. A very witty commentator with a clever sense of humor. He still retains his positive attitude while still having a spine. He's still chill and relaxing without being too slow or dull. Some of these aspects of Huck's personality from the original show were missing in some of those Yogi spin-offs, but thanks to this movie, we see a more return to form for Huck's character. Dawes Butler really shines in this movie. Whether he's Huckleberry Hound, Yogi Bear, Quick Draw McGraw, or even Hokey Wolf, Dawes brought so much energy in this movie. What makes Dawes Butler one of my favorite voice actors is that whether it's from a character's accent, mannerism, or whatnot, he could make a piece of dialogue funny in his own way, even if the line itself wasn't meant to be funny in the first place. And that song that Huckleberry sings to Desert Flower, that was Dawes Butler actually singing this, which is very impressive considering how Huck is notorious for his terrible singing. By the 1980s, Dawes Butler's voice was starting to age. You can definitely tell in his later performances for some of his characters like Yogi and Peterpotamus, but despite this, he never truly lost his voice talent. He was still thriving with his characters, especially Huckleberry. The fact that Huck can actually sing outside of intentionally bad climatimes really showed us a bit of character development. In the original cartoons, Huck did have an actual fiancée named Clementine. Though we never see her in person, it is implied their relationship wasn't the best given that he often forgets her name. In this film, however, Huck beautifully sings By the Light of the Silvery Moon and doesn't forget Desert's name, showing us that Huckleberry has since moved on from Clementine and found a more fulfilling relationship with Desert Flower. Huckleberry Hound isn't usually seen as a character with long-term goals or much room for growth, but this movie does show that even someone like Huck can still have long-term dreams to accomplish. The fact that he now has a family and lives on a country farm felt like a very sweet and satisfying send-off for Huckleberry, which feels bittersweet in retrospect, because on May 18th, 1988, just days after the movie premiered, Dawes Butler died of a heart attack. This was his final outing as Huckleberry Hound and many of his wonderful characters. He also reprised his role as Elroy Jetson in Rockin' with Judy Jetson and Yogi Bear in Yogi and the Invasion of the Space Bears, both of which premiered after his passing. The Good, the Bad, and Huckleberry Hound felt like a great closure for Dawes Butler's legacy, because so much of Huckleberry came from Dawes Butler. While most of his characters were more or less impressions of famous celebrities and comedians, Huckleberry Hound's voice was actually based on someone in his life. I'll let the man himself do the talking.
So anyway, Huckleberry Hound was more laconic and laid back, and I got the idea for him down in North Carolina, where my wife was from, Albemarle, North Carolina. And when I was in the Navy, I'd come home on a weekend with my little ditty bag sailor and hitchhike, you know. And so this fellow would be sitting on the front porch next door. He was a veterinarian, worked with her daddy as a veterinarian too. And he'd see me come in, you know, panting just to see Murtis. And he'd say, "Hi, Dawes, come on in and set yourself down. What's going on?" Probably hadn't seen me for 3 weeks, you know, or a month. I'd say, "Oh, you know, about the same," and go for the thing. He said, "Come on up, sit down, we'll talk a little bit." I said, "Well, maybe a half an hour or so, an hour." Anytime, come on back, I want to talk to you.
So anyway, it kind of stuck in my head, and I was in the Navy then, but I put him in a little separate box. I didn't even realize I was doing it. And then when Huckleberry Hound came up, there he was, you know.
Butler has left a huge impact on the voice acting industry. He mentored many students who would go on to have successful acting careers like Corey Burton, Nancy Cartwright, Bob Bergen, and Tony Pope, with one understudy in particular, Greg Burson, taking over many of Dawes' characters after he passed. While Dawes Butler is sadly no longer with us, his legacy will forever live on by those who personally knew him, and those who watched any of the productions he voiced in. As for the other characters, the Dalton gang served as great antagonists, and they actually gave old Huckleberry a good fight throughout the movie. The constant battlings between Huck and the Daltons really kept me wondering what would happen next. The stakes were really high, especially during the second act. My only personal nitpick would probably be Dinky Dalton's design. It's not bad by any means, but I would have preferred if he had either of his original designs from the Huckleberry Hound show. I just think he looked funnier and more comical back then. Throughout the movie, we saw other Hanna-Barbera stars like Yogi and Boo Boo, Quick Draw and Babalooey, and Magilla Gorilla. While they didn't really need to be in this movie, the fact that they were included made the town of Two-Bit more enjoyable. Though there were a few characters I wish were in this movie, Pixie and Dixie and Mr. Jinx the Cat. For a movie based on Huckleberry Hound, it made perfect sense to include Yogi, Boo Boo, and Hokey, but it was a huge missed opportunity not to include Mr. Jinx and the Mises, given their presence in the original show. Maybe Jinxie could have replaced the bartender, and have a very brief gag of him failing to catch Pixie and Dixie, who are stealing drinks. Speaking of another Huckleberry Hound character, what about powerful Pierre? He was in more Huckleberry cartoons than Dinky was, yet Pierre has never appeared in anything after the original show. To be fair, the Daltons are a more fitting choice for the film's Western theme. Pierre could have been the main antagonist of this film as an outlaw, but why even have Pierre when you already have the Dalton gang? I can't think of anything in this movie that would have warranted Pierre's inclusion. Not only that, but I can't think of any gruff voices that Dawes Butler did in the 80s, so it would have been unlikely for him to reprise his role regardless. Hopefully we see Pierre again someday in a future Huckleberry Hound project. The soundtrack itself is also really good. Composed by Sylvain Lebec, the score has a great Western feel with a good sense of calmness, excitement, and danger. However, as much as I love the 80s synths the film uses, I personally think it would have been a much better movie if the soundtrack was orchestrated like the original Huckleberry Hound show. Heck, had this movie came out earlier, I imagine Hoy Curtin would have composed it. Honestly, it's hard for me to think of any genuine criticism for this film because of how much I love it. If I were to compare this movie to something, The Good, the Bad, and Huckleberry Hound would be the Hanna-Barbera equivalent to Disney's Mickey, Donald, Goofy, The Three Musketeers. In both movies, both main characters start out small, but they eventually get a bigger job, albeit only because they were easily controllable. They meet the love of their lives, but were no match for the main villains, especially since their close friends were too incompetent to help at first. However, their friends eventually rise to the challenge, helping our main characters defeat their villains, and in the end, both Mickey Mouse and Huckleberry Hound defeated their respective villains, restored peace to their environments, and won the hearts of their respective love interests. The reason I'm making this comparison, other than the fact that I just love Mickey Mouse, is because whenever I rewatch The Three Musketeers as an adult, I always question why it was never released in theaters, other than limited screenings at the El Capitan Theater, and I feel almost no different from The Good, the Bad, and Huckleberry Hound. With a few tweaks to the movie's script, storyboarding, sound, and overall cinematography, I think this movie could have been released theatrically. Could you imagine this being in 16:9? I doubt this movie would have done well in the box office, and I also doubt it would have been well received critically. But if Joe Barbera trusted Tom and John enough to write most of the film script, I imagine he would have loved to have made it into a theatrical film. But at last, they probably didn't have enough money to do a theatrical release like this. Not only would they need to find a film distributor interested enough in something like Huckleberry Hound, but they were also working on a theatrical Jetsons movie at the same time with Universal, so it probably would have been stuck on television either way. This was Huck's first starring role in over 30 years. In fact, the same year the movie came out was also the Huckleberry Hound show's 30th anniversary, so it does make me wonder if this movie could have given us a new Huckleberry Hound series. Hanna-Barbera made 45 new original Yogi Bear cartoons the same year and released them as the new Yogi Bear show, but could you imagine if those cartoons were instead used in a Huckleberry Hound revival alongside 45 new Huckleberry Hound and Pixie and Dixie cartoons? Sadly, the only Huck thing we've ever gotten after this movie was Yo Yogi. Huck went back to being a secondary character to Yogi, which is a shame since he's pretty much the only good character on that show. The Good, the Bad, and Huckleberry Hound felt like a fluke in some ways. Considering how much Hanna-Barbera loves shoving Yogi's name in shows and always making him the leading character in them, I wouldn't have expected them to finally do something with Huckleberry Hound, let alone a feature film. And while it's unlikely Warner Bros. Will ever make a Huckleberry Hound movie, it probably would have sucked anyways, I'm perfectly fine with this being the only Huckleberry Hound movie. Would I recommend The Good, the Bad, and Huckleberry Hound? Well, if you're a fan of either Huckleberry Hound or Hanna-Barbera, then absolutely! I cannot recommend this enough. In the end, The Good, the Bad, and Huckleberry Hound stands out as not only a rare starring vehicle for one of Hanna-Barbera's most important mascots, but also as a heartfelt send-off for Daws Butler and many of his amazing characters. While the movie isn't perfect, its charm, humor, and reverence for Huck's legacy make it not only my favorite film in the Hanna-Barbera Superstars 10 lineup, but also the best Hanna-Barbera movie that nobody talks about.
And anyone who says otherwise has a poop mouth with poop opinions.
Despite a few meddlings, I'm very grateful that Joe Barbera gave Tom Ruegger and John Luden more creative control for this film. Not only did their work on Yogi's Treasure Hunt prove to Joe that they were excellent writers in general, but also that they actually understood Huckleberry Hound and Friends very well. Tom Ruegger would later go on to work at Warner Bros. Animation, creating shows like Tiny Toon Adventures, Animaniacs, and Road Rovers. He would even later go on to create Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures. As for John Luden, this former Get Along Gang writer would later go on to write a few episodes of many popular cartoons, including Leapfrog's Letter Factory and Talking Words Factory. So that was my thoughts on The Good, the Bad, and Huckleberry Hound, a highly underrated Hanna-Barbera movie starring an old mascot that deserved better. So what did you think of this movie? Did you ever see it back when it premiered? Or did you catch the movie in later reruns? Let me know what you thought about this movie in the comments below. Till next time everybody, same Huckleberry time, same Huckleberry channel.